Hey, hi everyone. Welcome to Thames Valley branch of APM's first webinar in the series of NEC specific webinars. So I'm really pleased to have Richard Patterson here today. Richard works for Mott MacDonald. He is their lead on drafting and NEC procurement. Richard has many years of experience, not only in drafting the NEC4 documents, but he's written many publications and applied the contract throughout the world on many projects. So please save up your most difficult questions for him. Just on that point, we've got a couple of Slido questions to start with. So please use Slido when it's appropriate. But other than that, if you have questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to add them into the questions on your control panel, and we'll just pause Richard and ask questions at the specific points. So over to you, Richard.
Okay, well, welcome everybody. Thank you very much for signing in. I hope there's not too many desperately worried about missing the second half of the Welsh game. It is 1-0 to Wales, just so you know. So we've got a session today on a very basic introduction to the NEC contracts. What's all the fuss about? Why are they different? Is the basic strapline. On screen now, I've got this Slido malarkey, which I believe you've been told how to use in some joining instructions, I'm hoping. I think it's a question of pointing your fancy phone at the QR code and seeing what happens. And then we are asking you to, I think the first question was just, where are you? Just so we can find out where people are. And there we go, it's signing up. Somebody is 201559, good to know. Not sure how these go in any sensible order. We've got somebody from India, which is good to see. Manchester, I guess that's a lot of people from the London area. Somebody from the Netherlands, which is great. NEC should be being used more in the Netherlands, I'm hoping. Ireland, it's being used, which is fantastic. And around the world. So a good sprinkling of people all over. So very great to see that, and good to see that the Slido thing works. I'll tell you that NEC is a fantastic form of contract. I'm slightly biased. NEC in the very old days used to stand for New Engineering Contract. And in fact, that's one point I want to get across today, that the contracts are not only about engineering. The main contract that we'll talk a little bit about later on is called the Engineering and Construction Contract. But really, NEC4 came out just recently, and I tried to get the name of the contract actually changed to the Project Contract, because it is just a contract for doing a project. And you guys are project managers, I assume, and therefore you should probably be quite keen on a contract which is designed for getting a project done. Of course, that didn't track off because NEC is particularly strong in the construction market. I'll do the introduction bit. Well, one slide is Richard Patterson introduction. So as Kathy said, I work for Mott MacDonald and sort of unofficially take the lead in NEC across our 16,000 strong group. I started out as a dams engineer, chartered as a dams engineer, got asked to do a couple of years in the contracts department because that was a good bit of experience for a young project-led engineer who just got chartered. That 2 years turned into 6. I went back into the main part of the business, but by then I was only doing contracts and wasn't doing technical. And I've been doing contracts ever since, and that was since 1996 now, when I came back from 3 years in Lesotho, building my lovely dam in Lesotho. And since then, I'm still sat in the water division of Mott MacDonald officially, and I get involved in some generally big international water-based projects. For example, a whopping great water treatment scheme in Dhaka is currently going ahead. And I'm also the procurement lead for a contract, I should say, in Lesotho in Southern Africa, which is a small matter of a $500 million concrete face rockfill dam, which is quite scary. Unfortunately, not using NEC, you're using FIDIC, which is the main competition for NEC around the world as a form of contract. and on some of those jobs, mainly because the World Bank and the international, basically all of the international lenders are still recommending that people use these fitted contracts, just because, I mean, they've been around for years internationally, and they are the standard starting point for international contracts in the construction field. But gradually, NEC, as we'll see in one of the slides I got a bit later, NEC is taking that. So I've now got a lovely button which says show my screen, and I hope that means I can carry on and I've got the screen. Let's see. That was me. That's the mug shot. I normally wear that pink shirt at conferences, but it hasn't taken a lot of use lately. Like everybody else, my life has been reduced to Teams meetings and training online, but I do an awful lot of NEC training online. I do the 4-day NEC project manager so-called accreditation course, which is run by NEC, which is like the Rolls-Royce of NEC training. Trying to do that online for 4 days back to back is quite a challenge, as you might imagine. Okay, so that's me. Move on. I have to put that in there. I come from a construction background. I just told you I'm a civil engineer by background, and therefore I'm thinking too much about construction, whereas you'll hear today everything about the contract can be done anywhere. So that question now was whether you're working for contractors, consultants, and so on. What's your level of NEC experience? What concerns do you have about NEC contracts even before we start? If you've got any of those, then just drop them in the chat and Kathy will fire them back to me. That's what I do. That's, like I said, I'm in the water division, but we do a lot of advice and training on all things related to NEC. I've got my little spreadsheet showing we've got about 15,000 people logged as having undertaken Mott MacDonald training in one form or another. And as I hinted at earlier, quite a lot of that is done directly for NEC training. This session, and in fact the idea for these sessions, started with what we call in Mott MacDonald the bite-sized session. So we have a series, one a month, right the way through the year, which is broadcast across Mott MacDonald. We also invite our clients in these days as well on specific aspects of the NEC family of contracts. And what we've done now, I was asked to put together a series of these for you for APM, and obviously I'm hoping they're going to be of some interest to you. Today is a very, very general introduction, and a session, next one, is specifically on program. Now, if you guys are project managers, you should be really interested in program, and you should be really interested in the fact that NEC does program better than any other contract on the planet. Then we've got sessions on the early warning process and on compensation events. You guys are project managers. You know that it's change that causes havoc in projects. NEC has a really good process for dealing with that called compensation events. We then got a specific session on the supervisor, which is basically the name is wrong. It should have been called an inspector because that's what they're doing. That's the person that makes sure monitors how well the contractor is actually delivering what has been asked for in the contract. And then we finish off, if you can see forward to November, a specific session on the key changes in the contract from NEC 3 to NEC 4, which came out a couple of years ago now. And I was honoured really to be a small part of the team in NEC that helped change NEC 3 after 12 years to NEC 4. Okay, so the objectives today, quick hour session, basic intro, key strengths, key differences. We have this language, traditional contracts, which sort of knocks around the world. I'd love to know what other traditional contracts you guys are using. The building sector still uses JCT contracts quite a lot, although they are gradually moving across to NEC now in the UK. I obviously want to make you aware of some of the pitfalls, and then we'll finish up with a so what for me. Okay, housekeeping is a little bit irrelevant because you're all sat at home. So firstly, it used to stand, as I said, for new engineering contract. Now, in fact, 15 years ago, I don't know, quite a while ago, we dropped that. So NEC is now just a brand, and it's a family of contracts, as we'll see. And on the screen, you can have a quick skim through the history of where it's come from. Started back with a guy called Martin Barnes, who at the time at least, was the president of a funny organisation called the Association of Project Managers. It was Martin Barnes who was the bright spark that said procurement is broken. We need to think again about how we write our contracts. And they started brilliantly. I don't know whether this is going to work. Can you still see my picture? I'm not sure. I'll give it a go. They started with a blank sheet of paper, which is quite radical. They didn't go and amend other stuff was out there. They learnt from the other forms, but started from scratch. So we had 10 years of NEC2, 12 years of NEC3, and now NEC4 has been released. We'll see later that NEC is used across the world, and in particular is mandated for construction in Hong Kong. So it's got a lot of credibility now. It's not new. It's not just for engineering, and it's a damn sight more than a contract. So new engineering contract is not a good thing to say anymore. It's just NEC. Having said that, you may or may not be interested to know that it's actually owned by the UK's Institution of Civil Engineers, because that was the organisation that saw the light and come up with some money to support the development of the contract way back in 1985. If you were designing a new family of contracts, what features would you set as your priority? Now, I do this a million times in training sessions, and I know that what you said, I can fit within those 3 bullet points. Wouldn't it be nice if we had a contract which was clear, written in simple language, was flexible, and most importantly, was actually a stimulus to good management? Wouldn't that be a nice thing to have? Some of you will have experience of day-to-day running of other contracts, and most other contracts are not very good at either of these 3 things. That's just a pregnant pause to see if you can be bothered to read that rubbish on the screen. That's a clause.
Just a button there, Richard. Sorry. Just a button. There's a comment to say that one is using the JCT form of contract.
Yep. Okay, JCT is well established. It's been used in the building sector forever in the UK. Very similarly, it's like FIDIC has been used internationally forever. And I've got a presentation somewhere else, I didn't put it on in this one, but I asked people what is the most dangerous phrase in the English language? And the most dangerous phrase in the English language is, we always do it this way. And therefore we can't be bothered to have a look at and see if there's a better way of doing things. And that's why I'm here tonight, to suggest that NEC might be a better way. This is a sort of language we sometimes get in other forms of contract. This is the language in NEC contract. This is actually taken from NEC 3. But you see the simple short sentences. The contractor provides the works in accordance with the works information. So there's clearly a document called works information, which interestingly is in NEC 4 is now called scope, but don't let that worry you, where the client has got to write what they flipping well want. You write that in the works information and the contractor gives it to you. And then more importantly, no, not more importantly, separately, the contractor designs the pipes of works which the works information states he is to design. So in one sentence, we've got a super flexible contract, because we can either have the contractor designing everything, or we can have the contractor just designing the traffic lights because the employer has already designed the road. It's up to you when you set up your document. You can do it as you like. Everything is written in the present tense, which is radical. When the contract first came out, the lawyers had a fit. You can't write a contract in a present tense. That's just not possible. But it is possible. There's one clause at the front which says you do what it says in the contract, and then everything else is present tense. And that reflects the mentality of the contract, because we are going to use the contract and do what it says. Then all the way through, we've got very clear reasons for not accepting things that come from the contract, and a clear clause which says the client cannot accept for reasons that aren't stated in the contract, but if they do so, they trigger a mechanism called a compensation event, which gives the contractor the chance for more time and money, which is fair enough because you didn't tell me. Does mean, obviously, emphasizes the need for a good scope document. So one page on clarity. Firstly, it's written in plain, very readable English. It's got a very clear structure. I'm biased, I've been doing it for 25 years, so I know it pretty well, but it's relatively easy to get your head around. It's not littered to references to laws in the core clauses, but as you'll see on a slide coming up, there are minor secondary options to suit specific bits of local law. You can have a wild guess at where YNZ2 might be used. And as we'll see, there's a big family of contracts, and they've all got the same structure, the same concepts, and the same language. In terms of flexibility, anything you want, whatever you want a contract for, whether it's a project or a service or supply, whether it's big or little, any sector, it's not a civil engineering contract. I think I said that before. It's a contract for getting stuff done. And you can use it for almost any procurement strategy. I've already shown you, you can use it for any level of contractor design. As we'll see in a minute, there's a wide range of payment options available. And NEC, the contract, I'm a contracts person, I've been doing it for too long, and fundamentally contracts are about risk allocation, and NEC is very, very good at risk allocation. There'll be some people on the call that call themselves risky people or risk managers. You will love NEC, and we can use it anywhere in the world because it was designed not to be tied into any particular legal system. So the family, this is what our clients do. They need a business case for a thing. They might need to design some stuff, build it, and then operate it. And they do that for simple things and for highly complex things. Anywhere in the space on the screen, if you want to get somebody in who doesn't work for you, for your organization, you're going to need a contract. So we start off with a professional services contract, NEC PSC. Sorry, I'm going to start using some of the what I call the CMAs. Do you know what a CMA stands for? It's a completely meaningless abbreviation. I apologize. Professional services contract. You can appoint a consultant to do anything for you, which might be any of these 4 phases of a project. If you want to get anything actually built or constructed, or I should say done, because it doesn't really have to be what you might think of as construction, then you'd use the engineering construction contract. And you can see from my slide here that I've shown it allowing for some design because of the clause I showed you 2 minutes ago. And up here, this is the complex project. So ECC is being used for High Speed 2, for Crossrail. It was used for the Olympics. It's used for big projects. You wouldn't use the ECC for something costing a few $100,000. You might use something else coming shortly. But first, contractors don't actually do very much these days. They spend most of their time managing subcontractors, and therefore NEC provides a contract which is the same as the ECC, the engineering construction contract, but it's used as language because it's moved down from contractor, I should say moved along from contractor to subcontractor. But those are the big contracts. If you've got a relatively straightforward project, I'm currently looking at using the engineering and short contract, engineering construction short contract. Would you believe it, for a project in Myanmar? That's what I've been doing this afternoon. Guess what? That project's on hold at the moment in Myanmar. You might understand why. And guess what? There's a subcontract version of the short contract as well. So a big contractor, tier 1 contractor, might be contracted by Highways England or the Environment Agency under the engineering construction contract, and they might get chunks of the work done under the subcontract or the short subcontract. That's where we were in 2005, and the market said, "Can we have we love this NEC, but can we have it for a service?" So there's now, there has been for many years, a contract for a term service to provide a physical service to a client. And guess what? There's a short version for a little service, just the cleaning. My favorite story is that there is a term service short contract for washing nuclear underwear. I just love that story. There's also a framework contract for where a client wants the mechanism to be able to let a series of contracts when they know what they're doing. Those separate contracts could be under any of these, but the overarching document is called a framework contract. There's also an adjudicator's contract for when things go wrong. There's a supply contract, and there's also a contract, a short version of the professional services contract. And there's a real link there with APM, because my good friend and colleague John Broom, who is your chair of your procurement group within APM, and John is a serious NEC specialist, like I like to think, like myself, although to be fair, John has written the books. I just write the articles, John writes the books. So that document, I think at the time, was actually recommended to employ you as a project manager. I want a project manager, I'll need a contract. Let's use a simple, straightforward, but good contract, professional services contract. That's where we were in NEC 3. And then along we came in 2017 with a few new members. We renamed the adjudicator's contract to that. Don't worry about the detail. We've now got a professional services subcontract. Radically, we've got a contract for design, build, and operate the thing. And we've also, even more radically now, got a contract for an alliance. That latter one is the only one that's different because it's actually a multi-party contract. Everybody is in the same bed together, signed up to the same obligations, benefiting and meeting the same performance requirements. And then the alliance contract sets out how those parties will share the gain of coming in under and the pain of going over. Very, very flexible, and that's starting to be used on the mega contracts. So that's a takeaway. Please, yeah.
Sorry, just trying to get a question in from Vlad.
Please.
We'd like you on whether the NEC contracts are suitable for EPCM type projects, for example, where a consultant is managing and coordinating a number of contractors on a project.
Absolutely. So that's what, when I was a young lad, we used to call that construction management. Basically, you then have a separate contract for each of the different contractors. Those separate contracts could be either the construction contract or the short contract or whatever. Then the construction manager, that's the consultant you're talking about, they help a client put together those contracts, and then they help the client manage those contracts. So the construction manager themselves might be employed under the PSC or the professional services short contract, and the actual construction contracts that are used to deliver the physical works can be any of these contracts, logically the ECC or the short contract. So good question, and hopefully that's a good answer.
We've got a couple more questions.
Please, questions are great. I love the questions. We might be here till 7 o'clock, but never mind. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Or even 8 o'clock.
Okay, so we've got 3 more, although they might come in. How does the alliance contract differ from the framework contract?
Okay, that's a simple one. The framework contract is an overarching contract which enables a client to let separate contracts. The alliance contract is a single contract, and as I said before, the alliance contract is very different because all of the parties signed up to it have an equal status and they're all buying into the same set of performance targets. Okay, and more?
Yeah, so just following on the alliance contracts, could it be used for a consortium of professional service providers?
Plausibly, yes. That's a really good question. I've never had that one asked before. I don't see any reason why not. If it was intended to be a multi-party get-together to deliver certain things to a certain performance requirements, then in principle, yes. Although the alliance contract was very definitely drafted to allow it to be used to build something, to construct something. So I'm a little bit unsure on my ground there, I'll be quite honest. I think if you, it's more likely that in that situation you would have the similar benefits by having just a joint venture between those consultants and a single point of contact between the joint venture and the client. Okay.
There's a few more questions.
Okay, do you want to, yeah, go on.
Okay, right, let me just try. Are contracts linked to any particular procurement routes?
Absolutely not. You can do anything you like with them. The one thing that we haven't got in the contract is a single contract for DBFO, design, build, finance and operate, otherwise known as PPP, or in the old days PFI. But we do now have a contract for design, build and operate. And I'm hoping before I retire, somebody tacks on the F to the DBO contract to make it DBFO. But any other normal procurement route, as we just heard, construction management, management contracting, design and build, can all be done using NEC contracts.
So someone's asking which contract would D&B contracts come under?
Okay, well, so the D&B contract is the engineering and construction contract. You can also have a level of design done under the short contract. If your design is big and complex, I'd recommend you use the engineering and construction contract. If you remember, I showed you the clause which says in that contract, the contractor designs whatever you bloody well tell the contractor to design. So you can go in and say, I want a water treatment plant. I want it to deliver 10 megalitres a day of clean water at this point, design and build. Or you can tell the contractor how many reinforcement bars in each wall. You can design as much as you want. Okay? All right? I probably better push on a little bit, otherwise we're never going to get there. That's the danger of having quite a lot of people on the call. But I love to answer questions generally, so let's push on a bit more and then we'll come back for another break in a moment's time, okay? So that's just a takeaway slide of what those contracts are. In terms of flexibility, all of the big contracts have the following structure. They are all wonderfully modular. This is where they are so different and so special. So this is the ECC, and it has a series of 9 clauses which are called the core clauses, and they're in every ECC contract. They cover early warning, the basic process of sorting out compensation events. They cover the basic process of paying and program and so on, all the standard things you'd expect to find in a project contract. You've then got 6 options for payment. This is the radical bit. So these are just tack on extra words which get dropped in on top of the core clauses, and all you have to do as a client is say, I want to use option A. Option A is a lump sum contract. Option B is a remeasurement contract with an old-fashioned bill of quantities. Options C and D are both target contracts, which are quite radical, where we pay the contractors real costs, and if they go over the target, there's pain. If they come in under the target, there's a gain share. Option E is a reimbursable contract, and option F is a management contract where the contractor gets paid directly the cost of all of its subcontracts and does very little work itself. That's the procurement route that we call management contracting. So a client chooses one of those 6 options. The client then chooses one dispute resolution option, and in the UK they'll choose W2, too much detail for today. Then this is where the NEC is radical. There is a raft of what we call secondary options. So as a client, you pick and choose, do I need these options or don't I? The most obvious one is X1, which is provision for inflation. If a client doesn't use X1, there is no mechanism for inflation. Therefore, tenderer, you better flipping well include for inflation, because you ain't going to get any more money if the prices go up. But the client has to make a series of decisions from 1 to 22, picking, do you want retention? Do you want delay damages? Do you want to include an information model, and so on? So the client can pick and choose between those. At the next tier, there are so-called what I call jurisdiction-specific options, and because these are where the contract is ever so slightly tweaked to make it match even UK law. So the client might well use UK2 because it's probably needed to comply with what's called the Housing Grants Act. On top of that, the last level is called the notorious Z clauses, which is where a client can say, I like NEC, I love all this flexibility, but I'm also going to tweak it and change it and add to it and delete from it and bugger around with it. And some clients do too much of that, and then we lose the standardization of the super flexible NEC contract. But I just like the picture there. It just shows very clearly this modular structure of the ECC, And that's almost exactly the same slide for the professional services contract and the term services contract. In other words, the three big ones. Okay, good management. What we've got is clear documents. It's all very easy to say. That's assuming you can write a decent scope, which is where we all know the problems occur. We've got very, very clear roles, and the whole contract is written around processes. Processes for design submission, processes for dealing with change, processes for updating the program. Real difference with NEC and JCT is a real sort it out now approach. There's a time scale for absolutely everything. And when there is a change, a radical difference in NEC is that we don't, as a default, we don't use the prices that we ask the tenderer at the tender stage. Instead, we actually have to forecast the real effect on time and the real effect on the contractor's costs of this new change or this new risk that's happened, which the client has said, I don't want you to price for that risk. If it happens, we'll pay you and we'll give you more time. That's the compensation event I mentioned. We've got a really simple process called early warning, which basically says talk to each other. We've got a massive focus on program, which I'll go into a lot more detail on the next session. Got flowcharts for everything. Fundamentally, we've got a contract focused on the project. Some of you remember the old line of, he's getting contractual now, he's quoting clauses at me. Big thing with NEC is you have to get everybody to be contractual, to use the contract, to do it properly, to do it professionally. You're all professional project managers, you should like that, I hope. Big difference with NEC, what I didn't emphasize before, that word forecast. So when there is a change or a compensation event, most traditional contracts say, keep records, we'll agree the records, we'll wait till it's finished, we'll keep some more records, and then we'll try and sort it out. NEC says, sit down in a room and forecast the effect and do a deal on time and cost. That's radical, and it needs different skills for the people running the contract. So, cost, quality, and time, you've all seen that picture. This is the project management triangle. I've heard it said that Martin Barnes, who invented NEC, also invented that. I'm not sure whether there's any truth in that. But if it's true, he missed something, because I like to convert that to a tetrahedron with risk on top, which you project managers will love. And I'm telling you that NEC is very, very good at managing each of those four corners of that tetrahedron. It's a better way of doing business, as long as you've got people that are willing and able to manage the project. Oh, hang on, we need some project managers. Have we got any project managers out there? I think we have. Very good processes for time, cost, and risk. Supports collaboration, and that's a really important part in the current market. Everybody is wanting contracts which support collaboration. I could give you an hour's presentation on how the NEC does that, but not today. I'll hint at some parts of it. And mostly standardization. I got involved in NEC first time way back in 1996 when Yorkshire Water looked at the way it did business and realized that they had about 15 different forms of contract being used for different types of work. They moved to do everything with NEC. Massive standardization benefits across the business. So NEC is wonderful, it's brilliant, it's great, but the truth will out. If you write rubbish documents, you will have a hard time. If you don't do the active management that NEC demands, you will not get the benefits of NEC. To make that happen, culture, training, systems are vital. And because the NEC is so well structured, there are several now in the cloud contract management systems to manage precisely and clearly and drive the correct operation of the contract. Okay, deep breath. Where is it used? These countries, let's have a look. So UK, pretty much the standard for infrastructure and well used in buildings. South Africa, it's one of 4 forms allowed. Hong Kong, as I said, it's now mandatory for construction. New Zealand, it's becoming more common. India, very, very odd big contracts were done a few years ago, but it really hasn't taken off yet. Philippines, a couple of odd big infrastructure projects. Holland, the International Criminal Court, Can you imagine having a contract where your client is most of the countries of the world? God bless them. They did that, but they chose to use NEC for the first time ever in Holland. Belgium, there's a £3 billion project going through the books at the moment in Antwerp, where the client Lantis has chosen to use NEC. Peru, I've got a contract at the moment supporting a Spanish contractor bidding in Peru. You couldn't make it up, because the contract was used for the Pan American Games, and it's now being used for a whole series of big flood schemes in Peru. Quite remarkable. In Australia, it's just been recently adopted by Sydney Water for their next 10 years of projects, and there's hints there are some other users around Australia, and that's where I'm hoping it will pick up, because I'm obviously hoping, because I work for Mott MacDonald, I'm hoping we can go out there and help them use proper contracts for their massive infrastructure boom. Any questions have you got, Kathy, in there at this break point? I'll have a look at my clock as well and see how much time I've got.
Yep, we've got a few questions.
Okay, come on in.
So someone's asked to have a list of all the different options. So I guess that's looking at the different payment options that you'd add in.
Okay, do I have a list? Well, this is the contract. And I said it's a really easy contract to read. If you just need to look at the contents list, if I can find it. Let's see if I can find the contents list. Shouldn't be too hard. There you go, these are the options. So main option A, priced contract with activity schedule. Option B, priced contract with BOQ. The other four options are all cost-based contracts. A target contract with an activity schedule. A target contract with a BOQ. The difference there is that because there's a bill of quantities, the client takes the quantity risk, but there's still this collaboration-inducing concept of real cost and setting a target. Cost reimbursable, option E, and option F, the management contract. So I haven't got that. I don't know why I haven't got those words in this particular slide deck. Maybe I'll stick them in there before I send the slide deck round, if that's going to be helpful. Carry on. Any more? Any more for any more?
There's a couple about COVID. One of them.
Fascinating. Yeah, go on.
One of them's asking whether the Z clauses now include pandemic protection.
Okay, really good question. The simple answer is no. So there is no absolutely clear NEC language. This risk allocation language is a compensation event. So if I'm advising a client today, I will ask the client to consider adding a compensation event, which just says a compensation event is a pandemic is identified by the World Health Organization or something like that. Although, of course, today, if you were signing up a contract today, you'd have to say a contract except COVID-19. Sorry, a pandemic except COVID-19 is identified, because bidders know that COVID-19 is out there. I've been involved with a lot of clients trying to sort out the mess caused by COVID, and it's probably too much detail for today, but as I just said, there is no one simple clear compensation event. The nearest the NEC has is in 60.1. Hang on a minute, bear with me, I'm going to get there, excuse me. You can see my scribbled notes all over this contract. 60.119 is a compensation event. Let me just show you here while I'm here how good NEC is. Risk management. When it comes down to specific events, if the event is a compensation event, the client takes the risk. If an event isn't a compensation event, the contractor has to price for it, because they ain't going to get no more money. And NEC is just so wonderfully clear, because they're all written down near enough in one list. The most obvious one and the most important one, the project manager gives an instruction changing the scope. That's what causes 90% of the compensation events on UK contracts. 19 down here is an event which stops the contractor completing the whole of the works by the date for planned completion shown on the programme. Now, the lawyers tell me that the word stop in that context means makes impossible. It doesn't mean makes expensive. So it's possible that COVID might have done that, stopped the contractor completing the whole of the works, but in most cases, all it did was make it more expensive. So what I've been doing to clients, and personally and on LinkedIn a million times, is saying that clients for COVID should have been brave enough to tell their contractors to comply with the industry standard guidance for COVID, which was never law, but every contractor who had people working for them, common sense says those contractors will have to comply with that guidance. Otherwise, they're going to get sued by their own staff for putting them at risk. So I've been telling clients that they should have been telling their contractors to comply with that guidance and taking it on the chin, because that will be a change to the scope, because that will be a change to the constraints on the contractor, and that itself would then trigger a compensation event. Stop. Any more questions hanging there? Where are we on time? We're at 20 minutes.
There's a lot of questions coming in, yeah.
Okay, one thing I will do, if you can get the questions to me after the event, I'll be brave enough to try and come up with some short answers to them, just so that people know that. If you can do that,
Yeah, I think
Kathy, at
that'd
the end
be,
of the day. If you have got any
yeah,
other
something quite
interesting,
specific.
anything there that sounds good, then please let me have them.
Is force majeure covered?
Okay, that clause I just showed you, the one about stopping completing by a certain date, that is the nearest that NEC comes to force majeure. Force majeure, of course, is not a defined, certainly not defined term in the NEC contract. Good question. Any more for any more? I suppose I could look at the chat box and see. No, but I'm happy to
There's a
have you
lot
playing
there.
the MC role. Thank you. Let me carry on. We'll come back if there's time at the end. Okay, I think that's probably the best bet. So the next question was, so what, in a simplistic terms, for individuals and the organisation. Firstly, it took me a long while to find that. That's a picture of an open bottom drawer. NEC is not a contract for the bottom drawer. You've got to get it on your desk, turn the pages and use it. Seeing as I've got the video there, I think you can see my copy of the old NEC 3. It's been well used. And that's a cultural thing. You've got to get people to understand that we have to use the contract. Like I say, we have to get everybody at the startup meeting to say, that's how we're going to do business. It's professional. We've spent hundreds of pounds, probably thousands of pounds preparing this contract. We're now going to use it. So then the management consultant people out there would come up with this classic structure for how we're going to talk about something. And I think I've got some slides. Yes, I have. So for processes, pre-award, as I've already shown you in this very short presentation, you've got massive level of choices for contract strategy and how you use those different options. So as an advisor or as a client, you have to understand those options and develop mechanisms within your organizations for choosing those options. When it comes to standard for tender documents generally, you do have to be very careful. You can't just wedge in your previously developed scope documents for this new NEC contract because the language will have changed. So there's some work to do there. Obviously, what we advise clients to do is to develop templates and or guidance for the key documents that have to be produced. Contract data we haven't mentioned today, but that's a very short form. And then the works information, or scope as it's called now in NEC. In other words, just get sorted and get ready for it. Then we have contract management in terms of processes. We put together a little startup article, which I can share on getting things started up properly. You've then got to make sure there is a delegation clause. So in Mott MacDonald, for example, we require anybody appointed to be the project manager or the supervisor. I haven't actually mentioned the project manager in this presentation. That's really crazy, isn't it? Because we've got a whole lot of project managers out there. The name of the entity, the person that does the day-to-day management of the client on the client side is, wait for it, the project manager. Not the engineer, not the contract administrator, but the project manager. Because NEC recognizes that this is a project that we're managing. That person has a lot of stuff to do, and they may need to delegate roles down to other people. So get that sorted at the start. Realize that the contract does require decisions to be made. And some clients with their bureaucratic hierarchies, it takes quite a lot of time to get decisions made. That causes problems with the management of NEC, in particular with the acceptance of contractors' quotations for these change events, the compensation events. And as I've mentioned, all these standard systems are now available in the cloud. Now, I know most of the people who set up these organizations, the in the cloud systems. I am not on any commission, I promise you, but to not use an in the cloud system to manage a contract, certainly to manage an NEC contract, is just crazy in the modern digital world that we claim to be living in. Good suggestion is to set up some sort of audit, maybe just a month or so into the contract, just to see how people are getting on with managing the contract. In terms of technology, pre-award, nothing really more than storing and sharing and maintaining good sets of documents. When it comes to contract management, planning software, you are going to need a planning person who can program properly under a decent size NEC contract, because program is used, and it's used very clearly to manage the time effects, particularly of those changes or compensation events I've been talking about. You can do it all with emails, and you can have little forms with Word and Excel. You might come up with some fancy database, but like I just said 3 times, have a look at the in the cloud software. That's a diagrammatic representation of my inbox. But really, as somebody would have said, it's all about the people. Are they right for collaboration? Do they really want to work together? If they've been fed a series of FIDIC contracts or JCT contracts for their last 10 years, are they willing to learn and to change? And once you've put them in place, are they competent to start with, but also are they actually empowered to make the decisions that are required to be made to keep the contract and the project moving? Deliberately, I said their contract and the project, because they're the same thing with an NEC contract. In terms of training, where I'm biased because I do a lot of this for my living, we can go in and do a sensible training needs assessment for a team or an organization. We can have some general awareness, which you've just suffered today. We can put together some much more specific training for specific needs. I don't need to go into any more detail there, other than I will say, even if people think they know NEC, I'd strongly recommend you have a project startup workshop given by a John Broom or someone like myself, or somebody that knows NEC. It doesn't have to be a specialist, just to remind everybody how we're going to do early warning program compensation events. Make sure everybody in the room understands the mechanism and how we're going to do it. I must be getting close to the end now, because this is my favorite slide of all NEC training courses. This is the first clause in the language is subtly different, but it's pretty much the first clause in all NEC contracts. The employer, contractor, project manager, and supervisor shall, that's the only shall in the whole contract, act as stated in this contract, and in a spirit of mutual trust and cooperation. Now, I've said I like my acronyms, or in this case abbreviations. DWISIT, do what it says in the chuffing contract. That's the first line of the contract. It's telling you, you've signed up to this thing, do what it says. To be able to do what it says, have a wild guess, you're going to have to read the contract. So that's easy, but what about this spirit of mutual trust and cooperation? In training, I then ask people, has anybody out there got a relationship with anybody, a partner of any sort, hubby, wife, whatever? How do you score out of 10 your spirit of mutual trust and cooperation today? And then how might you encourage that spirit of mutual trust and cooperation? You can Google this, you will see pages and pages of legal diatribe. I don't care. Talk and listen to each other, and then do what it says in the contract. That slide is my one slide summary of the whole of contract management, but particularly NEC. And if you get that mentality amongst the team at the start of a job, you will have a nice time. So if you're not going to use it properly, don't use it. But if you do want to get to better control of your projects, please do use it. but please get ready for it. We've done it before, all over the world, all over the place. I'm presenting here from Mott MacDonald, so I might as well have a small pitch. It's only not unreasonable, is it, after an hour on a Wednesday night? We've used it all over. I'm very proud of the fact that I helped set up our NEC expertise in Hong Kong. And now we've got people out there who can do what I can do, but they can do it in English or Cantonese. We have, I don't know, some of your organisers might use Yammer. It's a Microsoft discussion group facility. We've got about 1,200 members on our NEC Yammer group where we chat about it and share tips and move issues around the issue. I link to that Yammer group some series of stuff like the bite-sized training that we do and a link to our practice site as well. That's the sort of training we're able to give to you if that's wanted. Like I said, the top end, we do deliver the NEC's 4-day accreditation training. And takeaway slides, we'll send the slides out. This is John Broom's book. If you're seriously interested in NEC, I highly recommend you read this. John writes as a trainer, so it's sort of a chatty writing style. You can pick it up and read it. It's not like a reference book. Having said that, an NEC4 version is coming out very soon. We've got what we call our little book of contracts, which I don't know whether we've sent that around yet, but if not, we will do after this session. That's quite a useful read. It's about 10 sides of the basic principles, some of which we've talked about today. And that's it.
So this is an interesting one.
Oh, it's working. It's working. Look at that. I like it.
Ah, thanks.
I love you.
Yes.
I love you to bits. That's what I was here for, to make you have a look and think about it. At least there's not many no's, which is good news. Okay, any questions, Kathy?
Yeah, so this is a good one. Is NEC4 suited to agile method?
A good question. And I'm going to have to put my hands up and say, I've not read enough about agile, I'll be quite honest. But my gut feeling is going to be yes, because it's a project and we do things and we tell the contractor what to do, and the contractor might do some design. The contractor will have changes, and we need a process to manage the time and cost effect of those changes. So, you know, I honestly can't see any reason not to. Stop.
Okay. Can you have a framework or a particular option where you mix JCT and NEC?
Under a framework, that is possible, and I see that done. There are various government frameworks which have been set up to be absolutely super duper flexible. I'm just going to put that slide into the presentation just while we do it. Sorry. Yeah, so there are frameworks can be set up. Basically, the framework is a structure which says this is how we want you to be able to roll out a series of projects, series of separate contracts. So those separate contracts, normally in a framework, if there are any particular changes to the standard, those changes are set out at the framework level and used for every separate contract that's let in following. But in direct answer to your question, there's no reason why the framework could not be flexible and allow the client to use different forms of contract under that framework. Stop.
Okay, thank you. Someone's asking here about who are the people that resolve the disputes? Are they independent groups?
Okay. The first line of dispute resolution in the NEC is the same as required by UK law, and that is the adjudication process. And that's an individual person. Lawyers favour JCT. I love it. Yeah, of course they do. There's more flipping money in them sorting the mess out. Sorry, did I say that? No, there is a lot of mess in NEC contracts as well. I'm not unreasonable here. Where was I now? It's difficult watching that Slido screen develop and trying to have a conversation. Yeah, so adjudication is the first line of dispute resolution. And then if either party doesn't like the adjudicator's decision, they are allowed to take it off to a what's called the tribunal, and there's a specific box in the contract where the client decides whether that final dispute resolution facility is going to be arbitration or the courts. Stop.
Okay, great.
Small contractors not familiar, I'm seeing on here. This was the why we're going to use it or not use it. Small contractors, there's still an education process. You know, NEC's been around for 30 years, but particularly in the building sector, people still use JCT. Can I make a wild admission, almost on national? It's not quite national TV, but I'm a small-scale building developer. I've just built 3 houses at my dad's fruit farm, and we use JCT. I'm sorry, I can't say it. We use JCT because the architect said that's all the builders understand. What he really meant was nobody ever reads the bloody thing, nobody takes any notice of the thing. And as I found out through my contract, the JCT minor works contract is just useless. It's got no standard payment mechanism even. I find it quite amazing. Sorry, carry on, stop.
Are there any clauses protecting the clients in case the construction regulation changes?
That's a really good question.
Fire safety.
Okay, yeah, really good question as we're coming at the moment. Well, remember the contractor's obligation is to do what it says in the scope. So if the scope says, points to a certain regulation, then it's possible and fairly standard. Some clients will write in, your document's got to comply with fire regulation XYZ or any other that may be issued. So that could be written in within the scope document. More better is that NEC, one of those secondary options was called X2, and the number is X2, which is a change in law. So if the client wants the contractor to have the risk of changes in law, the client does not include X2. And changes in law would normally include, or does include, any changes in any regulations which have legal status here in the UK. So if the client offers X2, then a change in law will be a compensation event. If they don't, then the contractor will just have to price for it because they're not going to get a compensation event. But it comes back to my point earlier about clarity. NEC is very, very clear at where the risk is. And that's, for me, is a very, very strong feature of NEC contracts.
That's a benefit to both sides, isn't it? The client.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Print screen. What was that? In one word, why? Let's put that in. Put that in the presentation. Carry on. Any more questions there?
Well, we really should wrap up. I've got a list of questions.
Oh, don't wrap up. I'm having so much fun.
Maybe this is the last one.
Okay.
What is it that's so good in NEC that you don't have in FIDIC contract?
Oh, dear me. Can I send you a link to my 1.5-hour webinar on NEC compared with FIDIC? I'll put that in the follow-up to the course. NEC is just clearer, better structured. So, for example, under FIDIC, the contractor can claim for some events they get time only, sometimes they get time and cost, sometimes they get time and cost and profit. The various places in the contract where you can make a claim are all over the flipping contract. In NEC, the compensation events are in one place and you get the same mechanism for time and cost for all of them. It's just straightforward and it's easy to use. Let me go back. Let me tell you why I don't like FIDIC. Do you remember why I don't like FIDIC? There was one little slide that shows why I don't like FIDIC. Sorry, I'm slightly biased against FIDIC. I have to use it in my international work, which just really upsets me. So basically, NEC, clarity, flexibility, stimulus to good management. FIDIC has recently changed. It's had an update to 2017, and they claim to have made it better and more management focused, basically trying to catch up with NEC. But the new FIDIC Red Book, which is the BOQ option, has got 50% more words. It now weighs more than a kilogram. And any poor person that's got to read through that, I feel for them. I feel for me because I'll have to do it on some international project coming around the corner very shortly. Sorry, that was a negative one to end up on. I'm sorry.
Well, maybe one more question then. Can you do the same for the JCT versus the NEC?
Again, pretty much the same. I'm not a JCT expert at all. I've never used it. I'll put my hand up. I don't know it at all. I'm sure if you know what you're doing, I'm sure JCT works. It must do, because architects around the country still love it. And they still say, we don't want to use that newfangled NEC stuff, or NEC is far too much management. But I haven't mentioned that. That's the main criticism in the market of NEC. It takes, quote, too much management. The reason for that is because NEC has processes for dealing with change, doing deals at the time, and tries to avoid leaving it for the claims merchants to come along later. But that's why you do need competent people with empowered people who can make decisions. And those compensation events, as I said, they're based on a forecast of the cost and time impacts. They will never be a right forecast, it's just a forecast. And therefore, inevitably, there is some negotiation between the project manager on the client side and the contractor to agree the cost of those compensation events. Stop.
Okay, well, I think the rest of the questions we'll deal with offline.
Okay, that's fine.
Around with the slides to the recording, however that works. So can we just pop over to the rest of your presentation?
Yes, sorry, because I've got some bits and pieces for you as well, haven't I? Show my screen and come back again. Yeah. Hang on a minute, I'll be there for just a second. Have you got my screen okay? I think you have.
We can see it, yeah.
Slide sorter. So all we want to do is go to there, and I'll leave it to you. You tell me when to press the button.
That's great, thank you. So thank you very much, Richard, for today's presentation. I see the next one is in July. That's around programs under the ECC and the PSC. Also there listed, you can see some other events that Thames Valley Branch APM have organised. So the ones coming up in August, the Unconference is something a bit different that our branch is doing. So the talks will be released closer to the time, but it's online collaboration and discussions. There are breakout rooms, and the first Unconference went really well. So I'd really encourage everyone to get involved with that one. Next slide, please. I sound like Chris Whitty.
You're right, you're doing a fine job, yes.
Here's the list of all the follow-up webinars that Richard will be running. They won't all be up on the events page of the website yet, but you'll obviously have this in the slide deck when we send it out to remind you to book on to all of them, obviously, because they'll all be great.
We can hope.
And this is another one from Thames Valley Branch. Every year, apart from last year due to COVID, we run the Project Management Challenge, which is a competition for people new to the project management discipline to run a real-life project in a safe environment. There are deliverables at set points through a 5-month program. We'll have a board of judges that will interview and mark your reports and your presentations. So it's a chance for corporate companies to enter teams, to run projects, to upskill people new to the PM discipline in a safe environment. So have a watch out on the Thames Valley Branch website. We'll send out flyers to all of our corporate members. If you are a corporate member, so corporate members in Thames Valley that reaches from Swindon to Farnborough, then please get in touch and we'll put you on the mailing list for this information. So it's really successful, culminates in a finals night where we have our finalists presenting on their projects and we have guest speakers and everyone has a jolly good time. So we're running again. We'll launch it in the autumn. So please get involved. Okay, so We will send out the question answers and the slides later on in the week. So I guess we'll see you again in a month or so's time, Richard.
Okay, that's fine. Do you want to probably best close this one down and give me a call back and have a chat about how we take it forward? But
Yeah,
I hope that was of use. I hope that was of some use to some of you out there. And if so, I'll hope that some of you come back in for the next session on programme. Okay, now the question is, did Wales win? Does anybody know? Can you put it in the chat? No, I'm sorry, I'm joking. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you.